So, yes, what is happening now is not Jim Crow, literally. But the historical parallels, well, they're pretty illuminating nonetheless. As Jamelle Bouie points out in the New York Times, a lot of people have misconception about the voting laws during Jim Crow. The laws that disenfranchised black Americans in the South and established Jim Crow did not actually say they were disenfranchising black Americans and creating a one-party racist state. It's true. When we think about Jim Crow, this is what springs to mind. We usually think of these images, right? Segregated water fountains and bathrooms that said what they were doing explicitly. Whites only. Restaurants, businesses. Segregation that was clear and obvious on its face. Voting laws, however, did not work that way. This is really important to remember, right? Because we had the 15th Amendment, the right to vote enshrined in it, paid with the blood of hundreds of thousands of Union soldiers and freed slaves, right? So it was illegal and unconstitutional in the Constitution to deny the right to vote based on race. So the whole decades-long regime of Jim Crow and voting rights was coming up with regulations that were race neutral on their face. As Jamelle Bouie explains, there was no statute that said black people cannot vote. Instead, Southern lawmakers spun a web of restrictions and regulations meant to catch most blacks, as well as many whites, and keep them out of the electorate. That's been the entire cat and mouse game to stop multiracial democracy in this country for over a century. For the majority of the time, it has been a non-slave country, right? Since the Civil War, the majority of the time, there were these rules in place. This is what it looked like on the actual front lines of the voting rights fight in 1965 in Selma, Alabama.
The Dallas County Courthouse steps became a dramatic stage as prospective voters lined up for the registrar's office inside. The key actor was Sheriff Jim Clark. More than half of Dallas County citizens were black, but less than 1% were registered by 1965. Throughout much of the South, custom and law had long prevented blacks from registering. In Selma, the registrar's office was open only 2 days a month. Registrars would arrive late, leave early, and take long lunch hours. Few blacks who lined up would get in, and getting in was no guarantee of being registered.
Oh, no. The office is just closed today, ma'am. Register's not here. Has nothing to do with race. Oh, we just took some drop boxes out of your neighborhood. Nothing about race here. That's a clip from the amazing, the legendary PBS documentary Eyes on the Prize, which I recommend everybody watch if you can. And you can see why this is a problem and why in 1965, with a lot of pressure and blood and sweat and tears and protests, the federal government had to step in with the Voting Rights Act. Now, the Voting Rights Act had a few brilliant provisions, one being if certain states or localities or districts, not restricted to the South, we should note, with a history of discriminatory practices wanted to change their voting procedures, they had to go through a process called preclearance. The Justice Department would evaluate whether the proposed law was a harmless change or whether it was just another one of the old tricks that have ruled for so many years. The key innovation there was that they were concerned with what the effect of the law would be, the disparate impact. So no one can say, oh, wow, closing the registrar office early hurts all the black folks who work until 5? Who would have guessed? We wanted the registrar's office to be closed early because it saved money, you see. Now, conservatives gutted precisely that provision of the Voting Rights Act, right? Back in 2013, conservative Supreme Court Justice John Roberts famously writing, things have changed dramatically in the South, and throwing out the preclearance requirement, or at least the formula for it, telling Congress to come up with a better formula for which areas should be covered by it. Now, Republicans since then have shown zero interest in doing that, even though they're in Congress. They could take it up if they wanted to. And so what it means is that court decision has set off nearly a decade of attempts to suppress the vote, battles in state after state as Republicans get back to, well, let's say new tricks. So here we are in the year 2021. The Republican governor of South Carolina, the state, I should note for just historical accuracy, of the nullification crisis and Fort Sumter, is arguing against another federal bill, H.R. 1, that would protect and restore voting rights.
This bill, H.R. 1, threatens the constitutional sovereignty of the state of South Carolina. Now, those are not just words. That's very important. This country, our state, is built on the sovereignty of the states. This bill takes that away.
Sovereignty of the states. Our country is built on the sovereignty of the states. It's a claim you've heard before throughout American history, right? A federal voting rights law would be an egregious affront to the sovereignty of the states, particularly the sovereignty of the great state of South Carolina. How can anyone listen to Governor Henry McMaster braying about the indignity of the federal government coming into his state to preserve equitable access to the ballot and think this has anything at all to do with Jim Crow? Ilya Shapiro is the vice president and director of the Robert A. Levy Center for Constitutional Studies at the Libertarian Cato Institute, wrote about what he calls the outrageous double standard of the backlash of Georgia's new election law in the National Review this week, and he joins me now. It's great to have you on, Ilya. I wanted to start with just some sort of historical conceptual level setting, right? Because I think you and I would agree on a few basic things. One is that clearly it is the case that is a conceptual matter. One could devise a facially race-neutral voting change that actually is designed to or has an effect that's disproportionate racially, right?
Sure, particularly if you have legislators saying, I want to make sure that Democrats don't vote, or I want to make sure that racial minorities don't vote. If you have evidence of that kind of intent, then you're harming only areas that are predominantly, Democrat or minority, that's suspect.
Right. But I guess it's interesting you introduced the point of intent, right? Because to me, in some cases, if you go through the historical record, particularly in Jim Crow laws, you do catch legislators saying things like the goal of this law is to restore white supremacy to the state. That's an actual quote, I think, from a felon disenfranchisement debate back in those days. But in a lot of times they don't say that, right? Because they are aware of the 15th Amendment. So they say things like, no, we just want to protect ballot integrity, right? So in a historical sense, it's also just a historical matter that people have used facially race-neutral changes in the project of keeping particularly black people away from the polls.
Well, to the extent that whatever voter reforms in the last decade or so since Shelby County or otherwise are meant to suppress votes, they've done a tremendously bad job. Voter turnout has increased. Mississippi and Georgia have higher black turnout rates than white turnout rates. After voter ID was introduced, whether it's in places like Indiana or Georgia or Tennessee, people came out more to vote, including blacks. So, you can talk about voter suppression, but it's just as much of a myth as Republicans going around talking about voter fraud all over the place.
Well, that's not true, right? I mean, first of all, we know that there are disparate impacts to things like in the state of Georgia, right? So we know that black voters, for instance.
Not sure.
Well, we know that black voters, for instance, wait on longer lines, right, than white voters. We know that.
OK, it's not good to have long lines, which is why the Georgia law says that if a precinct has too long lines, you have to create more opportunities next time.
But wait a second. But if we say that you've got, 51 minutes on average for black voters versus 7 minutes for white voters, right? Now, you can say, hey, look at this. When all was said and done, black voters voted at a higher rate, which, again, that's great, right? Look at this. This is data that we got from Jonathan Rodden, who did a great study of this. But it's still the case that, you are taxing people. So if people manage to overcome that, well, that's good. You and I agree.
But you know who sets up voting places?
You shouldn't have a disparate time tax on people like that, right?
But Chris, you know who sets up polling places? It's counties, and the overwhelmingly Democratic counties are the places where a high percentage of the black vote is in Georgia and elsewhere. So for whatever reason, they should, create an incentive. They should have the counties do more, and the state is trying to do that by expanding opportunities for early voting, for absentee voting. And in fact, in Georgia, there is more of that opportunity than places like New York or Delaware.
Right, of course, but the direction of the change matters. Here's my question to you about Georgia, which is a law that you've defended, and you think it's crazy that anyone's reading too much into this. My question with this, and the law I've seen in Iowa and Texas, is what is the problem you're solving? So it's like, if you come to me and say, we're now going to change the ballot matching, the signature matching we had on the ballots with the voter ID, and Ilya Shapiro and others say, that's perfectly fine, that's race neutral, why does that matter? And my question to you is, what's the problem you're solving? Why are you doing that? What was the problem?
Are you honestly, Chris, come on, you're doing a disservice to your viewers by saying that signature matching is somehow more accurate or less susceptible to suppressing votes that the officials don't like than matching up by computer the social security number, the driver's license, all these things that blacks have at the same rights that whites do. And in fact, states like Colorado, where Major League Baseball moved its All-Star game, has even more of that stuff where they have all mail-in ballots, and they have even more of that kind of ballot integrity measures.
Right, and they have
'Cause
90
look, Chris, we
90%
can't
turnout.
agree on so many things, especially that you want to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat, and you want to increase public confidence in elections. In Georgia, there is not that confidence on either the left or the right, and that is why this law was passed.
But that public confidence. That's the crux of it here, right? Because what you just articulated, which is the rationale that many Georgian Republicans have articulated, is that you have to restore confidence. But again, we all live in the world. We read the news. We understand the context here, right? The context of that confidence, particularly on, say, ballot matching, right, signature matching, is that the president of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, formerly, and the leader of the Republican Party, waged a campaign to say that the ballot matching specifically was fraudulent, that there were many fraudulent votes. The fraudulent votes were particularly coming from black counties, predominantly places like Fulton, Gwinnett, and other places. Like, that's what is causing the loss. So to turn around and say, well, why would you people think they're up to no good after we just watched this? Strikes me as
Donald
ridiculous.
Trump makes accurate statements from time to time. Signature matching is a sham science. And I'm glad that they're moving to something more exact and precise and objective rather than is your curlicue matching whatever you were writing, 10 years ago when you were a younger person in a different body.
But there's no evidence that there's a problem with it. There's no evidence. Like, again, it's a solution in terms of a problem that is happening after this massive
Look, you know what, Chris?
dislocation.
There's neither systemic voter suppression nor systemic voter fraud, but we introduced certain measures to increase public confidence. The greatest argument for voter ID, which is hugely popular, including among non-whites, including among Democrats, including especially in Georgia, isn't that it prevents fraud, but that it increases public confidence in the election.
The logic of that is that there would be tremendous public confidence for Republicans in Georgia if you said only Republicans could win. And that's the dog that we're chasing here. Ilya Shapiro, who's devoted 15 years of his life to working on these issues. You should read what he has to write. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.